Well, back it's been almost 20 years when I was on that sabbatical and I was gone for those months. And where I stayed at the North American College is on the hill right next to the Vatican. So I got to see St. Peter's a lot. And you can learn a lot of things there. There's an awful lot of history there. If you're a history buff like me, there's a lot one can learn. Have you ever been there? There's a picture of it right there. You'll notice that right there in the middle of the square, in front of St. Peter's, is a large obelisk. An obelisk. That obelisk is from Egypt, and it's over 3,000 years old. The Romans, the pagan Romans, loved everything Egyptian. And they would cart all kinds of things out of Egypt and bring them to Rome, including obelisks. Now, that particular obelisk weighs around 350 tons. How the Romans did it is lost to history. They had tremendous engineering skills, though. They built aqueducts that still stand and work. They built roads and bridges that still stand. So, no doubt they had the engineering skills to make it happen. But they did it all with ropes and wood and iron and animals. And, they had no hydraulics, nothing modern to do it. But they did it. And in 40 AD, that particular obelisk was brought out of Egypt and planted on a racetrack, a chariot racetrack, which was right next to the Vatican Hill in 40 AD. A little over 20 years later, that was the same place where Peter and the early Christians were crucified. When Nero burnt the city down, which was largely made out of wood, he wanted to build a whole new stone city. That's why he did this. And then he blamed the Christians for it. He needed a scapegoat. And so that's where Peter was crucified. Now, fast forward 250 years, and Constantine declares Christianity illegal. And he goes about the business of supporting the church and building, for the first time, churches, because up until that time, the Christians didn't have churches. They met in people's homes for Mass. And the Christian community in Rome thought it'd be great to have a church built over the tomb of St. Peter, and that's why that spot was picked, to build it over the tomb of St. Peter. That church was completed around 340, 350 AD, and it lasted until 1500. That's the original St. Peter's. By 1500, it was getting old. It was starting to lean, cracks in the foundation, cracks in the walls. And I believe it was Pope Julius at the time, decided that it would cost more to fix it than to build a new church. So he built the new church. That's the new church. That St. Peter's is the new one, completed in the mid-1500s. So when you go to Rome, that's one of the newer ones, believe it or not. Well, a later pope, because this was done over a number of papacies to get all this done, Pope Sixtus V decided that obelisk, which would not have been there originally, would have been off to the side. He decided he wanted it moved 800 feet to be put right smack dab in the middle of St. Peter's Square. How to do it? Like I say, there's no modern equipment, no hydraulics, nothing like that. So how do you do something like that? Well, he got his engineers together, and they consulted with the admiral of the Vatican fleet. Yes, the Papal States had a fleet. And they figured with enough tackle and enough rope and enough men and enough mules and enough oxen, they might be able to jerry-rig something to slowly lower it down, then cart it over on rollers, basically roll it on these giant wooden rollers, basically giant tree logs, then roll it over to this hole, which they would dig in the center, and then with another scaffolding, slowly hoist the thing up. It was quite an elaborate plan. But there are a number of problems with this plan, because when you're dealing with a lot of mules and oxen, if something scares them, they could jump, they could, get out of line. And if that happens at a crucial point of moving, the thing could come crashing down, because this is going to be your main muscle. So, to solve that problem, the Pope said, well, then we must do everything in total silence. No one was allowed to speak within a half mile of the St. Peter's. The penalty was excommunication, and he meant it. And all the hooves of the oxen and the mules were padded, like in giant soft shoes they made to put on these animals. So it'd be quiet. That wouldn't disturb the animals, and they'd get this done. So the work began. A lot of the workers were sailors, because they were used to working with rope and tackle, because all the ships back then were done with sails. So they're starting to lower this 350-town, obelisk, when some of the ropes begin to snap. This is not a good sign. One of the sailors immediately knew what the problem was. He recognized it. The ropes were all dry. The ropes they used back then, you wetted them down. The wet ropes were able to take more tension, were able to hold stronger than a dry rope. This is the nature of the fibers in these ropes. But he didn't want to say anything because he didn't want to be excommunicated. Then he watched another rope snap. He decided, if I don't say something, this thing's going to come crashing down. So he yells out, you gotta wet the ropes. Well, immediately the captain of the crew, nodded his head, took a whole bunch of guys to the main fountain, get as many buckets and barrels of water, raced it up the scaffolding, and began to throw as much water as they could on all the ropes. It saved the day. The rest of the ropes held. They lowered it down, they rolled it to the middle, and then they began the process of hoisting it back up and putting it in that hole. It was over. It was a success. Well, what about this poor sailor who spoke out? His name was Benedetto, by the way, and he's from the town of San Remo. Well, he was brought before the Pope. He thought he was going to be excommunicated, and the Pope said, oh no, young man, you're the hero, you saved the day. And out of appreciation for what you did, breaking my rule to save this obelisk for the center of the square, I'm going to give you and your family and your village in perpetuity the right to bring and give the palms for Palm Sunday to the Pope in the Vatican. Well, it's been almost 500 years since that happened, but Benedetto's descendants and the people of San Remo, Italy, are the ones every year who gather the palms and make the trip to Rome, and they have dinner with the Pope, and the Pope blesses all the palms. So if you ever go on, WETN, or you watch the papal Palm Sunday Mass, and you see all those palms, now you know where they're from, and now you know why the people in this village are the ones bestowed with that honor. I often tell people, and I really do mean it, that the best way sometimes to just think about God in your life is to do it in silence. Turn the television off, turn your phone off, take 5 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever you can, and just quietly meditate and think about God in your life. But then again, from time to time, you got to speak out.